As the society we live in today continues to become more progressive, the role of women in the business world, and thus the stock market, begins to become more and more important. When we look at the women in the stock market today, more and more CEO positions are being accompanied by women. What does this mean exactly? Well, first let's look at the history of women in the stock market. The first woman to become a Fortune 500 CEO occurred in 1972. Her name was Katharine Graham, and she took over the Washington Post after her husband's death. The first female black CEO to join the Fortune 500 was Ursula Burns, and she became the CEO in July 2009 of Xerox. There's a ton of studies done in the field of psychology that pertain to how women analyze risk and handle risk relative to men, and those studies suggest that women tend to be a lot more risk averse, meaning they are much more cautious to risk and they have the tendency to handle risk better. Because a lot of men tend to be fueled by status, prestige, and aggression in their business decisions, often this can lead to taking on much larger positions of risk, and we see this in many facets of life. There have been a couple of studies to suggest women are also better investors, given their analysis of risk on average. A recent study in particular pointed out that women's investment returns relative to men is at on average 0.4% superior. Now 0.4 may not sound like a lot, but when you accumulate this over years, the spread can be quite substantial. When we look at the role of women in the stock market, in this video, we're going to look particularly at the S&P 500. Why? Well, because the S&P 500 is lauded as the biggest and most important stock market index in the world. In the S&P 500 right now, there are 24 CEO positions accompanied by women. Here is the list of the women and the respective companies. And you can also see the date in which they have joined. So first and foremost, we look at the 24 companies that these women manage and the returns on the stock from the point in which they were appointed CEO to the present day. As you can see, what's pretty interesting about this is the majority of these companies have experienced positive returns. More specifically, if you invested in 24 of these female CEOs, only 4 of the companies would have you lose money. In other words, 20 of the 24 positions, you would be successful in making money and experiencing positive returns. Another interesting factor is when we compare it to the performance of the market. So right here, we have the respective returns versus the S&P 500's returns from the date these women were appointed CEO. And in that regard, 11 out of the 24 companies outperformed the market. Outperforming the market is extremely hard, and many people don't do it over a long period of time. However, it is quite impressive that 11 out of 24 of these companies have been able to do so. Now, what if we constructed a portfolio based on these respective stocks? Well, let's say we constructed a portfolio 3 years ago. Now, of these 24 companies that are run by women, if we go backwards to 3 years ago, 17 out of 24 were still run by these same women. So in other words, 17 out of the 24 have been in this position for longer than 3 years. So we picked 17 out of the 24 companies, and the portfolio is equally distributed with a weighted average where each company has an equal position in the portfolio. So in other words, because there are 17 companies, each company represents 5.8% of the total portfolio. And the interesting thing, if we do a 3-year stock comparison, is had you invested in these 17 companies that were run by women 3 years ago, your portfolio would experience a return of 70.82%. Now that is quite substantial, especially when you consider that the S&P 500 or the market as a whole has a cumulative return of 34.73%. As I said in the beginning, as society continues to become more progressive, women in the business world and thus the stock market are continuously beginning to be appointed quite important and powerful roles. Obviously, you can see from this video, the vast majority of these women have been doing a great job in running their respective companies. I should also note that you should never base your investment decisions based on the gender of the CEO running the company. There are a lot of factors that come into place, and I am by no means recommending that you invest strictly based on gender. This video was made simply just to expand our curiosity, especially amidst the controversial topic around women in the world we live in today in regards to the feminism movement, the labor statistics, and the pay gap that are making substantial headlines in the media. One last thing I'd like to add The average market capitalization, which is the size of the company, of the S&P 500 is $46 billion. The average market cap of these 24 companies run by women is $48.34 billion. So on average, these female CEOs manage a company larger than the average size company in the S&P 500. What do you guys think about this video? I have provided some sources below based on the information I gave, but as always, feedback is appreciated, and I want to thank you guys for listening. Hope you guys have a nice day.